Right. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And this is the fourth Diversifying Digital event I've done in the UK. I'm really excited to have my lovely panel with me today. My name is Alice Chance and I am a recruiter in the tech and digital field for transition partners, but also their diversity and inclusion advocate. So I've been working as a recruiter now for 2 years and then stepped into my sort of D&I role last year. It's been a really big change for me, but it's also something I'm really serious about, and I think everyone should be a little bit more serious about. And yeah, I really sort of enjoy working in this field. I love speaking to lots of different people. I think it's really important. What I've been able to do in this role is sort of reach out to different people in the tech community. So I run this event. I also run a digital diversity blog, which if you're interested in getting involved in, please let me know. So I will start off by introducing Nigel, if you want to go ahead and let us know a bit about you.
Thank you, Alice, for that. Great to be participating in this event today. Really excited to be talking to you all and answering some of these questions. I'm a director at Scott Logic, so we're a technology consultancy business based in London, Newcastle, Edinburgh and Bristol, and now open for business in Leeds. My interest in diversifying digital is very much around, how as a business we go about growing, attracting and retaining a diverse talent pool. My personal interest is more around the LGBT space as a gay man, so that's kind of my angle on this. Thank you.
Great, thanks Nigel. Emma, if you'd like to tell us a bit about you.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for the invite to come onto this panel. I'm Emma Andrews, so I am the People and Talent Coordinator at Answer Digital. So Answer is a IT consultancy and digital transformation company based in Leeds, and within the realm of talent, that is naturally going to involve a lot to do with diversity, inclusion, and yeah, my aspect on it is really thinking about how do we empower our employees to really take ownership of their employee experience, have a voice and make sure that it's heard, and make sure there's that really key representation across the board, really. So I am really excited to start talking about this with you all today.
Oh, okay, thanks Emma. And Hannah.
Hi guys, I'm Hannah Chadwick. I'm the Director of Fortitude Training. I'm based here in Leeds, and thank you so much for inviting me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you guys and to meet the lovely panelists. I provide training and consultancy services to businesses to help them make the experience of the world of work that much better for their employees. So really focusing on well-being, improving communication skills, leadership, and also improving awareness around D&I. So specifically, I do a workshop on non-visible disabilities. So that's really my passion project because of my own experiences. So yeah, that's me.
And Hannah, who's so amazing, who just actually did one of those training sessions and is now on this. So yeah, superwoman. So I'll start us off. I'll kick us off with our first question. And that's, what do you feel diversity inclusion means to you, and what value do you think diversity brings to the workplace? Would anyone like to go first? I will go first.
Oh, go on.
Okay. So I guess for me, I always find it really important that everybody has a voice at the table. Everybody has a voice to be heard. And I think that's the main thing for me, is inclusion over diversity, and everybody having the right representation within a company.
I think for me, the answer is kind of partly in the question. So one of the words you mentioned there was value, and I think it's about seeing the value in people and their uniqueness and what all those different people can bring to your organization. So not focusing on what somebody can't do, but what they can do. What can they bring? How can you benefit? Because I think there's often a risk of overlooking that and just, hiring people that look like us and that think like us, but then we don't realize that we're missing out on all that value by having a bit of tunnel vision.
Yeah, very much echo that, I think. And yeah, what does diversity bring to the workplace? I mean, I think it brings a more vibrant and fun place to work, I think, as well. You know, we don't, you know, we want to hang out sometimes with people like us, but actually hearing people's stories. I mean, I've loved the pandemic in a strange kind of way, that we're all kind of sat at home and learning more about each other and our lives and our families. And I think for me, it's about, you know, everybody bringing their whole self to work, being able to be authentic, and appreciating what everybody brings to the table. And of course, from a business perspective as well, what does diversity bring to the workplace? Well, most studies would say it brings improved business performance as well. So there's a you know, a real business reason for doing this as well.
I'd have to really agree with you, Nigel, on that. I think really thinking about it, if you have a group of people and they all think the same and they all act the same and they all have the same way to approach things, you'll all have a really great time because you'll all agree with each other. But actually, you're going to be creating this thing that I've heard called kind of echo chambers, where actually just having your opinion kind of echoed back to you. So really, you've not got anyone challenging you, and really that's really going to, I suppose, stifle innovation in the work. And really, diverse workplaces, they're going to really support proactive problem solving as well, because different people are going to spy different ways of doing things, and then equally different opportunities where there might be a mistake or there might be some sort of risk to the business as well. It's really important.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, great opinions there. I really like what you said then, Emma. The word challenging, sort of people challenging each other, is a really interesting take on it. And I write notes whilst I'm doing this, so if you can see me, I'm writing notes about what people say. I think they said something. So I guess what's been actioned, or what have you actioned within your company, or what have you seen action within companies to improve diversity and to create that inclusive culture?
Shall I dive in?
Yeah, you want to go for it, Emma?
Isn't there? Yeah. So from our answers perspective, I suppose, it's really thinking about it in terms of one of the ways we've done it is thinking about how we really put out there that commitment to diversity and inclusion to our workforce. And one of the examples that we have is last year we actually became an employee-owned trust, and that was really saying to everyone across the company, we're all diverse, we're all unique, we've all got our own ways of approaching things, different opinions, and with that we're all together, we're all included, we all have a voice, and we all can make a difference, and we all can have a say in the decisions that actually impact us as well. And that's been through a lot of our internal initiatives actually are employee-led. So we have a lot of diverse working groups, we have workshops, we have surveys, and that really helps to make sure that we've got a diverse range of perspectives represented, but then also that all of those perspectives are actually included in the discussion. So yeah, that's what we've been doing in our space anyway.
I think what I've seen with clients that I work with is they definitely stepped their game up over this past year in terms of the type of work that they're doing, making sure that they're not just paying lip service, they're actually doing the work. So just like Emma said there, you know, having things like diversity networks and action groups, and, you know, really supporting the different diverse talents that they've got in their organisation, and not just doing that sort of in quiet as a side thing, but really promoting it and raising awareness in their organizations, rather than it just being down to those individual groups to engage with themselves, really making it central to the company and what their values are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's you know, from the top being very explicit that this is important to the business, but then also creating the time and space for people that have those ideas, want to run those little events during Pride Week, whatever it might be, and supporting that, and being seen to support that. So absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with sort of supporting, running those events, having it from the top and filtering down. And I guess a big thing as well is, and this sort of leads on to the next question, is how do you sort of retain that? How do you retain that inclusion? How do you retain the diversity, especially as a company, which I'm sure Nigel and Emma working in organisations that are scaling and constantly growing, is how do you keep that momentum? How do you sort of prioritise diversity when you are scaling a business at crazy rates? I
think the thing that probably helps is like having somebody like an Alice in their office. So
Yeah,
I think having somebody whose sole responsibility is to focus on D&I initiatives, I think that helps the organizations that I work with and the ones that I'm seeing that are succeeding in this area. We all have the best of intentions, but things naturally fall by the wayside. When you've got somebody that's doing D&I in addition to their core role, you naturally find that things don't always get picked up, or it becomes sort of a side note that never really gets followed up on quite as importantly as it should. So I think by having that specific person that's dedicated to that, or indeed outsourcing that to a specialist who is going to handle that for you and make sure that you're celebrating awareness days, that you've got the right groups and the initiatives in place, I think that really helps businesses so that even when they are focusing on scaling their business, they're not losing sight of what matters in the D&I spectrum.
Yeah, definitely. I'd agree with that. And sort of education from the start, having that in place, having a diversity inclusion strategy in place from the beginning or as soon as possible should filter down, like we were saying before. It should then, the processes should already be there. You should already have that sort of culture, and you should have already built that right culture from the start.
Yeah, I think as well as that, on top of that, I completely agree, Alice and Hannah, with your points there. And to add to that, to make sure that continues, I think it's really important to then continue to have kind of reflect on it and have like a hard, honest kind of conversation with yourself to kind of go, right, how is actually diversity, D&I, what is the presence of that across the entire company? Because as you say, Hannah, it can get kind of left by the wayside or something, and it can't just be kind of a bolt-on sort of thing. It really needs to be foundational across the company. So I suppose just maybe having that reflection on yourself, asking people across the company, how do you think we're doing on this, and really making that continuous. So as your company grows in diversification and the diversity of your workforce increases, yourself and your inclusivity practices also develop with that. It's not one and the other, they need to grow up together, really.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, embracing diversity and inclusion is integral to our growth plans, because we couldn't grow if people were leaving the business because they didn't feel included, or we weren't looking at across the full range of the talent out there. We wouldn't be able to achieve our growth aims, I don't think. So it has to be absolutely integral to the business.
Yeah, definitely. It's sort of getting
what you were saying, Alice, about that having, a few of us have mentioned about diversity of thought, and it's going to help with your scaling because you're going to have those creative thinkers that are bringing different things into the mix, whereas you're going to find it much harder to scale if everybody thinks the same and just all reflecting the same thoughts and opinions to each other and just saying, yeah, you're great, you're great. Well, we're all going to just have the same output, aren't we?
I think for us as well, as a consultancy, we've got to think not just about, it's not about just about our people, but also as a business, how we service our clients. And if all of our clients are diverse as well, and we're growing as a business, we're working with different clients in different sectors, offering different services. So if we don't represent the sort of the ecosystem that we're working in and the organizations we're selling to, that's going to hold us back as a business from growing as well. Yeah,
completely. It's sort of having as well diverse people in the hiring process, have different people conducting your interviews. Don't just have just one person, usually a straight white man doing all of your interviews. That's all I'm going to say, because you're only going to attract a certain type of person, and it's like, it's getting that culture right from the very beginning. As an organization, or what do you think their problems are around diversity? What do you think companies are facing when it comes to sort of problems and issues? I know for me, and speaking to people, there's still so much unconscious bias, money, and people not investing into diversity sort of programs and inclusion programs, I think is a really big issue, and just sort of not setting that precedent from the beginning of, we want to be an inclusive company, we want to hire inclusively. What I tend to see is big problems sort of in the recruitment industry, but interesting to hear what you guys see from the other side.
Well, I think just following on from you were just mentioning about interviewers and making sure you've got a diverse interview panel there, and then bias there, Alice. I think there needs to be, there can be a problem in terms of actually taking a step back and recognizing, is there opportunity or is there risk of some unconscious bias? Is there risk of similarity bias as well? Because obviously as humans, it's not possibly because we're discriminatory, it's just that we veer to what, we know, and who acts like us, who talks like us, we think that, we've got this special bond with someone because they, yes. But actually, that can have a really detrimental impact to our hiring process, because at the end of the day, that what that results in is a lot of people who think the same way. Like I was mentioning before, it's that echo chamber issue. Really. So making sure that actually to mitigate that, thinking about education pieces. Are we educating the people that are interviewing about the risks of unconscious bias? Are we getting their buy-in to things and processes that we've put in place to mitigate that, whether that's, blinding applications and things like that? Do they have an awareness of it, and do they have an understanding of why it's so important, really?
Yeah, I loved what you said just then about similarity bias. I've not heard that phrase before. And I am so bad with that. If I speak to somebody and I'm like, and they just mirror me, I'm like, oh my God, I love that person. You can't help it. And you just, and you just come off call and you're like, oh my God, that was the best ever because that person was just like me. And it's just, it's sort of getting that out of your mind and trying to sort of wire your brain a little bit differently. And it's not easy. I think one thing people don't understand is it isn't easy. It isn't an easy task. Things are always changing. You have to constantly stay up to date with sort of diversity, inclusion, best practices and everything like that.
I think that can hold it back as well, Alice, to your point, that it's not easy. So sometimes that makes organisations think, I just don't know where to start. And then much like in our personal lives, sometimes when there's a job that you need to tackle or a goal that you need to work on, but you don't know where to start, so then you do nothing. And that could be the worst thing to do, because just you don't achieve anything that way. So I think that can hinder a lot of organisations, just not knowing where to begin and then ending up doing nothing. Or then you've got the other end of the spectrum where sometimes they kind of, like with the George Floyd situation and the Black Lives Matter movement, there were a lot of organisations making kind of knee-jerk reactions and right, we've got to release a statement, we've got to do this, we've got to post a black square. But then actually there was no follow through after that. And then a lot of their employees are then looking at them and thinking, well, okay, you said this, but then what are we doing about internal hiring practices? What are we doing to make sure that there's equality of opportunity in terms of career progression for underrepresented and marginalised groups? That they were all, I think it created more problems for some organisations, or, they released a lot of diversity data, a lot of the organisations in the States. But then their customer base was saying, well, okay, you've told us this, you've told us that you've got these groups that are underrepresented. What are you doing about it?
It's all quite performative.
It
was all for sort of LinkedIn for show, and it was very much performative actions. And I haven't seen many companies do the sort of with the follow through from that.
Yeah, it can be just. I echo your point, Hannah. Can be hard getting started, I think, particularly for small businesses as well. But I think the important thing is you don't have to do it all on your own or invent it all yourself. And, I'd really encourage business owners, particularly small businesses, to reach out, network with similar businesses, do things together. You don't have to do everything on your own, I think. You might think, I'm not big enough to have a network for this or to support this activity. But, there are lots of similar businesses out there going through similar challenges. And certainly I've benefited from, exploring my network and talking to the other people in similar positions.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And I think a big thing about it is you are going to have to invest money into it. And I think a lot of people don't want to have to do that. They think they can just get people from the organisation and, this person can do this and they can do the diversity and inclusion, and that's their job now as part of their other job. So they're taking on another job, they're not getting paid anything for it. And for a lot of people, it's quite exhausting. It can be quite triggering, some of the stuff they had to deal with, especially around sort of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement last year. It's hard work. And I just think sometimes people just think it's easy and they can pop a rainbow flag during Pride Month and they can put a black square when they need to, but it's a lot deeper than that. And it needs to run through an organisation.
And not leaving that responsibility with specific people, because again, a lot of the friends and people in my network, they the employers that did want to respond, they were looking to them as, you know, their Black employees, or, you know, I'm sure it happens with Pride. Oh, well, we'll ask our LGBT plus community what they want to do, but actually it's not their sole responsibility to educate everybody else. And it's just sometimes the employers have the best of intentions, but then it kind of has the reverse effect of making people feel more isolated, because they think, well, it shouldn't be my job to do this for our whole organization. We should all want to be part of this, because otherwise surely it's a contradiction to the whole idea of diversity and inclusion if we look to a Black person to handle the you know,
you've got to do it all. And you've got to look after everyone, because we've got Black. We've
got to be, you know, we've got to be in this together.
And there's always so much, there's so much more than that as well. There's like so many other groups that need to be represented. And I do think everything that happened last year has been a real sort of kick in the backside for a lot of companies, and they've had to sort of really look at what they're doing, and people are holding businesses accountable. And I think I do think it's great that people are being held more accountable nowadays. So I mean, one of the benefits of social media. Sorry, go on, Nigel.
No, fine, Hannah. A lot of the things that sometimes people initially think they need to do to support diversity become non-inclusive. You know, we'll have an LGBT network, the women's network, or whatever it is, and those groups then become a little bit cliquey, and you know, they need to be done in the right kind of way and supportive. And I think, you know, inclusion is a cultural thing, so it's like, you know, we want to be intentional from the top about what's important in our business, our values, and how we make decisions as a leadership team to support everyone and make everyone feel included, rather than it's been sort of a bolt-on, if you see what I mean.
I think it's really important to have a set of values that are not only values that are kind of pasted on a wall or something, but a shared mission, a shared purpose, shared values that everyone can actually go, we're all diverse and we all have different, you know, perspectives. But actually, we've got this thing that we're all working towards, because otherwise, as you say, it kind of all becomes a little kind of a bit siloed. So it's really key, I think, I really agree with that.
I've had a couple of questions asked. I said I was going to keep an eye on them and I forgot. So Paul Pilling has just asked, sort of in relation to that question, whether anybody has had a look at the Tech Talent Charter, which looks at a whole range diversifying tech and digital employees. So has anyone seen that before?
You broke up for me a little bit.
Sorry. Typical. Has anyone signed up to the Tech Talent Charter, which looks at a whole of diversifying tech and digital employees? Has anyone seen that?
No, it's not something that I've heard of before.
I've heard of it. We haven't signed up to it yet, but we are looking more broadly at our sort of, you know, social value and how we measure ourselves on that and publish that. So I think it is interesting. I think there's a lot more maturity coming in the market generally, in the industry, around how people benchmark themselves. You do start gender pay reporting, but I think there will be other things that come along.
Claire has said as well that Leeds City Council have signed up to that as well. Paul, if you're still there, if you could put any comments on the chat thing for everyone to see, that would be great. Thank you. Just about the Tech Talent Charter, I'm sure people would be interested. I've also had a question, or just a comment through from Patrick, who has said that the most challenging aspect of D&I is definitely unconscious bias, investigating its self-change process, which is often an outside the workplace experience. How can we create interactions or workshops that bridge the balance of meeting the business desire to remove unconscious bias with the very personal experience of overcoming one's own conditioning? That's a really good question and really nicely worded, Patrick. I think, in my opinion, and from my sort of experience, obviously you can get unconscious bias training, but your own conditioning is sort of checking in with yourself. I look at myself and I realize my privileges, and that's something that I do quite a lot. I have to step back and be like, I'm a white woman, I have privileges that other people don't have, and understanding that my voice isn't always the voice that should be heard, offering my voice to other people. There are quite a lot of things that I've done, but I think taking a step back and looking at a bigger picture is one thing that really helped me with unconscious bias. I don't know if anybody else has ever done anything.
I think on the flip side of unconscious bias as well, I know I had quite a large client approach me and they wanted unconscious bias training, but we had to be very careful to not label it as unconscious bias training, because I think what sometimes you get is it gets people's backs up because it makes them feel that they're being accused of something. And going back to the beginning and what Emma was saying, we all have, there's various different biases. You've got affinity biases, there's all sorts of different biases. And when we take the time to understand those, then actually you realize that, oh yeah, nobody's accusing you of being racist or being homophobic or whatever it may be. Actually, it's just that we've all got these ways that our brains function that can cause us to sometimes do these things. But then it's like you said, Alice, having those measures in place to check yourself, to reflect on, am I making these decisions because of XYZ, and having processes in places that can kind of override an individual's personal biases. So, like having blind CVs, for instance, and, or not relying on, expecting people to have a certain grades or have gone to a certain university. Because again, there's ripples of discrimination within those areas, because if you come from certain backgrounds, you're more likely to have been able to go to a better university, or you might have had access to financial resources. So just making sure that processes are in place that are going to filter out as much bias as possible, really.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Hannah. That was a really good answer. So our next question is, what recruitment efforts have you seen to support a diverse culture, and are there any tips that you could recommend for creative and inclusive recruitment processes? So I actually saw one the other day. My friend was applying for an apprenticeship with Channel 4, and you didn't have to just send a CV. You could send a video, you could send a blog, you could send like your blog, or there's like, or just your CV, a cover letter. There was all different ways that you could apply for this position. And I just thought that's great. I am rubbish at writing things down. But in a situation like this, I feel very comfortable talking about myself. So I would feel probably more confident speaking and telling somebody about myself like this, and putting it all down on paper and then writing a massive cover sheet, which is something I would never typically have to do anyway for my job. So why am I then having to do it for a recruitment process, which I thought was really cool. I don't know if there's anything anyone else has seen that's worked really well, or.
Well, actually, I was speaking to a mate of mine the other day, equally, and he works in the sport industry within the DE&I space, and we were talking about this idea. I think, Hannah, you mentioned it about blinding applications or blind applications, and there's actually platforms and services now that I think one of them is ePloy, and they actually do the blinding process for you. So companies who haven't got the time to kind of go through each CV and application, actually all of that is done for you. So it's really making it a lot more accessible for companies who don't have the resources to put that into their process without those sorts of services. So I think that's something that's becoming more prominent, really.
Yeah. What was that called? What was that company called?
ePloy. So
ePloy. Because I have to do that to CVs sometimes. It's real plain. Yeah. Yeah, so you can save me some time.
But it's really important, because then that is really it's a big step towards removing that unconscious bias and all those.
Definitely.
Making it really easy to integrate that into your recruitment process, really.
Great. Has anybody else noticed anything? Or see anybody else got anything to add on to that one? I should move to the next question.
I haven't seen anything in terms of the recruitment process, but
no, I mean, that's okay.
It's just me, myself and I at this end.
Do you know there was another one as well with Microsoft? Microsoft have a whole sort of process for hiring people with autism, because they get a lot of people, especially in sort of dev and tech roles, and doing a coding challenge to begin with. The interview process isn't just like completely linear. It's not lots of sort of talking or written processes to it. They do a technical test at the start, so it's like a coding challenge. And yeah, I think that's worked really well. I think it's cool because there's lots of companies and bigger companies. Oh, someone's just joined from my work. There's lots of bigger companies that are taking on this new sort of hiring process. Next question is, what advice would you give to other businesses who are wanting to get started with diversity and inclusion? I guess we kind of touched on this earlier, but if there's anything else you'd add?
I think, yeah, you can't necessarily do everything at once. I think start the conversation, be intentional about what you're going to do, be open with people about what you can and can't achieve and why. And it's not a thing you just like, we're now going to do diversity inclusion and it's done. You're starting something that's continual, there's constantly new best practices, different things going on in this space. So I think to stay current, you've got to recognise that it's an ongoing commitment.
Absolutely. I think that I think we have mentioned it as well, that there can be a lot of worry about it in terms of getting it absolutely right and thinking of absolutely every single perspective and angle, whereas actually just having small kind of entry points or starting points and thinking, well, we'll start with this and we'll see what works and we'll kind of go from there. So I suppose thinking about it off the top of my head in terms of, thinking about your recruitment process, I don't know, where you source candidates from, the channels that you use. Are you using a diverse amount of channels to make sure that you're actually broadening that pool of candidates? And then on the other side, it's thinking about, well, how are you empowering the people internally in terms of how are you making them feel included? Are you allowing them to have a voice and not only have a seat at the table, but have that voice, make sure that they can actually feel like they can make an impact and I suppose the voice is being asked for, not just, having to actually, demand attention sort of thing. It's actually solicited.
I think that's a really good point there, Emma. Just not paying lip service, actually making it clear that this is important to us. We're not just doing it to look good. It's central to our values. It's central to what we believe in. We see the value that it brings to our organisation, and we're genuinely committed to this. We're not just doing it as a tick box exercise. And again, like Nigel said, it's not just a one and done. This is an ongoing process. We need to continue to educate ourselves. We need to continue to work on this. We need to continue to celebrate and encourage diversity in our organisations, because this isn't going anywhere. This isn't going to stop. The wheels are just going to keep turning on this. And if you're not moving forward with this, then you're going to get left behind, and then you're going to find that the type of talent that you attract is not going to be a very diverse group, and as an employer then you only stand to lose out, really. So you've got to keep up with the pace.
Encouraging diversity. I know it's fine. Encouraging diversity, I think, is huge. Is you want, making that your mission, making that what you want from people, making sure your whole business is on the same page on that you want this as an organization, and that you're passionate about it and you're serious about it as well. I think it's really important.
Absolutely. I was just going to add as well, I completely agree with all of those comments, but also kind of remaining, I suppose, realistic of the fact that no matter where you are on your journey, there are always going to be things you don't know, and always going to be things, I think, like you mentioned, Hannah, that you're going to have to educate yourself on. But you have to kind of sit comfy with the fact that you're not going to know and you're not going to be an expert in any of this. But the point is just to keep going and keep doing and making sure that you're listening to your employees and to the community that you're surrounding yourself with.
Really. Yeah, great, thank you. And the last question is, have you read anything, or have you been on any particular courses, or is there anything you'd recommend to our audience who are wanting to get started, who are wanting to ramp up their sort of D&I practices, or what would you sort of recommend to people?
Call Hannah.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, call Hannah.
Say that shameless plug.
No, definitely.
No, but I have a friend of mine who was on my course this morning. She has a company called Tell Jane Official, and they do lots of different courses as well. So there's one that she delivers that's around neurodiversity, because she's neurodiverse herself, and I think much like me with the non-visible disabilities side of things, or with unconscious bias training, I think it translates so much better, and you're able to connect with the training so much better when you are hiring somebody that's got lived experience in that arena. I think it brings so much value, and it can sort of unintentionally undermine the point of what you're trying to train people on if you don't bring somebody in that has that lived experience. So I think trying to make sure that where you are seeking training, that you're getting it from the right people, and again, that because the work that I do, I'm genuinely passionate about it, because it massively affected my life, and I'm the work that Marianne does, it's her lived experience. Do you get a much better output in terms of the benefits that you'll draw, and the how engaged the attendees at the session will be if they're hearing it from somebody that's actually got that lived experience versus hearing it from somebody where it's just a job, it's just some training slides that I've been given to deliver.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. We have actually had another question from Daniel. So I arrived at this panel from a neurodiversity talk. Consequently, I'm interested in diversity of thought and diversity of skills. My experience of work is one of hierarchy and skills silos. The common problem seems to be communication between disciplines, and the insecure nature of work seems to hinder the communication and the collaboration. Remote work seems to have exacerbated this problem in some companies. I'm looking for ideas of diversity of thinking, new ways of communication, and a more inclusive environment. Share ideas. Have you got any tips or ideas?
I think in terms of communication, there are loads of books out there on improving communication internally, which is then going to help you address the other issues, because oftentimes when we aren't able to communicate effectively and when we're not mindful of our biases, then that can hinder us in other areas. So for example, one of the books I've got here, 10 Skills for Effective Business Communication, that's really a good read, so it might be a good starting point.
Did you ask him to put this question in? Because you just had that book ready.
No, that's not my bookshelf just happens to be back.
That was just so perfect. Yeah, I think communication is very, very hard because we do all communicate differently. Some people prefer, email, some people prefer speak on the phone, some people prefer face-to-face. For me, I know I've really struggled not being in a working environment. I've struggled from that sense. I like being in an office. I find it harder to communicate with people when I'm not in that environment because I just get on top of myself and I forget about it. And I think as a business, opening communication, people saying how they feel comfortable working is quite important, and what people's preferences are, because we're all different, we all learn differently, we all communicate differently, and it's how we sort of approach that.
And when you understand the difference, so like I do a communication skills workshop, and when you understand how and why people communicate differently, you're able to get so much more out of situations. Because I get it. I used to work in the legal profession, and so very analytical, and you're looking at the detail and everything, and you want time to think about things. So then when I moved into training, and there were a lot of people that were extroverts, and I'm really introverted, and they just want everything now, and just they look at everything from a very high level and not really drill down into the details. So some of the trainers would struggle dealing with the legal trainers because we were all very into the nitty gritty and making sure the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed. And actually, when we learned about communication and how to communicate more effectively, it really helped to make the workplace much more cohesive and collaborative.
Yeah. At ANSA, we've used things called DISC profiles in our recruitment process, and it's basically understanding, not to kind of go, you're in this category, but understanding that differences between people. And what's interesting from that, it's effectively a personality profile. What's in there is that per profile, and there's various different places you can be on this circle. But what comes out of the report is, how are you most likely to communicate with others? How do you feel like you are going to receive communication in the best way? What do you necessarily prioritize in the workplace and just generally? And then what are the things that you actually really struggle with? And actually having those DISC profiles done for everyone across the company not only makes them appreciate how they themselves are raising their awareness about how well they're communicating, or what methods of communication they prefer, but then also their colleagues as well, because when you're trying to work together in teams, that can be really difficult, especially when everything kind of picks up pace and you just go and deliver on projects. That can often fall by the wayside, and it can be forgotten about in terms of the importance of appreciating how people communicate and how people prefer to be communicated to as well.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, that was all the questions. We've not had any more through, so I don't know if anyone else wanted to ask any more questions. You've got about 30 seconds to write it up. But thank you so much for everyone who has joined the conversation with us today. Thank you to my amazing panel. It's been really good. I always love this conversation. I think it is great to sort of listen to other people's opinions, get new ideas. And I think that's what we need to keep doing, is always learning and picking up new things from other people, everyone around us. I've wrote down loads of notes whilst we were talking, but yeah, it's been a really good conversation. So thank you, everyone. And hopefully we'll see you all on our next one. So thanks, guys.